In any visual medium, symbolism and the absence of dialogue leave a powerful impression on the viewer. It forces us to consider looking at a character, setting, or situation in a different light, whether it's horror, joy, sadness, or uncertainty.
Still remains within the sound of silence.
This kind of cinematic technique has always been present in film and television, executed from the quiet moments to the action-packed ones. It's a great example of the show don't tell rule in narration. Any scene can bring about emotions depending on what they do with dialogue, music, movement, and prop setting, and it's always fascinating to see how these things can speak for words. Not surprisingly, many anime borrow these techniques as well. The master himself, Hayao Miyazaki, utilizes silence in many of his films to give his audience a break from the action and observe his characters when they're not doing anything. Many times, objects are detailed and become strikingly memorable. Other noteworthy directors such as Mamoru Hosoda have followed him in using this technique, and the results are golden. Let's look at an anime from the winter season called ERASED. In this scene, Kayo, the girl, has woken up to breakfast after spending the night at her friend Satoru's house. Clocking in at just over a minute, this short scene leaves out any kind of dialogue and uses carefully placed objects to evoke feelings of happiness and sadness. The scene begins with an establishing shot of the breakfast. There are sunny side up eggs, bright red tomatoes, a salad, and everything topped off with some strips of crispy bacon. On the side, you can see a bowl of rice, some tamago, a seaweed salad, and a bowl of hot miso soup. This is the first scene from Kayo's perspective, and in the next shot, it shifts back up to her gleaming eyes over the sight of this plate. The breakfast has immediately induced a warm and welcoming tone with its visually appealing foods. An ordinary routine of the day becomes unfamiliar to Kayo, and her reaction plays a huge role in this later. The next few frames focuses on the lone cup noodle, plain bread, and 2 100-yen coins lying on the table. This builds tension, and what I really like here is how we recognize we're looking at these items from Kayo's perspective. It reveals a forced independence and neglect the child experiences in her home. This great black border around here serves as a neat and quick transition resembling the closing of eyelids. It shows the viewer that we're perceiving things from Kayo's point of view. Much like the previous shot, we move back to her looking over the plate. However, the biggest difference here is the lack of color and the tonal gray palette of the overall frames that follow. These last few transitions suggest a change in Kayo, and we're satisfied with knowing how different her life becomes in this one moment. Kayo sits alone in the park, looking up at the sky before the scene whites out and we return to the colored world. After a few contrasting establishing shots, the second half focuses solely on Kayo's reaction. With the clever use of item placement and a brief flashback, everything has climaxed to this one moment a single tear falls. The camera slowly rises to reveal Kayo's crying face, and here the silence is finally broken. The emotional effect in the second half is very powerful. Kayo's tears streaming down her cheek are as close to resembling real tears as possible. The details here add a very subtle depth to what this character has gone through and how she now sees something as simple as breakfast on the table. Kayo is the only one speaking here. While not counting as dialogue per se, I really appreciate that the staff didn't make her cries overly melodramatic. Her voice actress Aoi Yuki gives a muffled, strained cry that captures the realism of the situation. This break in silence really sets the emotional tone the scene tries to evoke. The soft music that begins as a gentle chime in the first half slowly transitions to an equally gentle but slightly more impactful piano solo. It fits really well with what the scene tries to accomplish in terms of showing us just what Kyle has gone through. Much like how the first few shots build tension to a reaction, the music here applies it by sounding miserably reflective at first, then ending off with an optimistic finish. As Kyle cries along to the sad piano music, Satoru's mom looks on with a sympathetic motherly gaze, while Satoru himself looks a bit surprised before his expression shifts to a sympathetic frown for Kyle. The scene then returns and ends on a haunting final shot of the warm breakfast. What really works here is the repetition of the shots. The breakfast serves as a hospitable symbol of hope for Kyle in this whole scene. I really like how we can know just what the characters are thinking or feeling without having them speak to us, and we certainly see this from Kyle's reaction and the facial expressions of Satoru and his mother. It's a fitting conclusion to one of ERASED's best scenes and maintains this somber tone until the music and shot of the breakfast slowly fade out.